right, everybody, we are going to get started. We are talking about exploring AI and innovation, and my joy here to introduce Lisa Atkinson, and we're also going to do a sort of interactive Q&A that Lisa will lead you through, so I'll be running around with the mic, so keep your questions ready and prepped. Let's have a big hand for our next session. Woo!
Hello, everybody. We are all consenting to do a non-traditional panel because we think it's time that we kind of switch up how panels are done a little bit. So we're here. We'd like to do a land acknowledgement. We're here on the traditional territory of the Tonga and the Chumash people, and we appreciate their wisdom and contribution to the history of Los Angeles, and we hope to learn more from all of them. And at the same time, we would like to acknowledge that we're human beings and that we have a lot in common. We were strangers last week, and we've been using Instagram and Zoom and WhatsApp and texting and emails to get to know each other. All of those use AI, of course, but it's the humans that we're engaging with each other because they so choose. So we're here by consent. We've all consented to be here today. We've all consented to be humans and present parts of ourselves that we would not necessarily present in a traditional technology panel. We're also here consenting to be vulnerable because it's a hot topic. Over 800 people are at the summit today, but apparently 1,000 people were not able to come because they had to put a cap for 800 people. We're also in consent to listen deeply to each other while we're talking so that, we're not busy formulating in our head what we're going to say before, the mic gets to us. So we've discussed among ourselves that we are committing to listening to each other. And so we want this panel to evolve. And so you are the group that's here, and I'm acknowledging you all today. You're all present, and you're here with us in present time. But we are also honoring the people who are watching this in the future. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they are. We know that they're all around the world. We know they're probably going to find us by doing a web search for AI innovation, and we'll pop up. And, the organizers told me that it'll be on YouTube possibly forever. So how do you make this a conversation that is so inclusive of every culture on the planet, every language on the planet, everybody who is searching for learning more about internet innovation? How do we include the children who are those who come after us and we're passing this over to? How do we include the elders who we want to make sure they're not left behind, but they also feel like they're not neglected and included in society? So we're going to be talking from a different point of view than just a room full of visual effects supervisors or post-production supervisors or computer technologists or virtual production people or AI developers or storytellers or whatever else is in this room that you all brought in here today. So I'm going to say, isn't this great that we're all here today and we all got to know each other and we're not strangers anymore? And I think that each person can introduce himself much better than I can. And so I'm going to ask Evo, we'll let the women start. Well, I'm going to ask Evo to introduce herself and tell you about what she's doing here.
Thank you. It's great to be here with all of you. My name is Evo Heyning. I've been a producer for 25 years, been a coder for 40, an artist for about 40 years as well. Got a little bit of a hum on my mic, sorry. And I started writing about our relationships with AI and technology as a creator, as a storyteller about 20 years ago. And figuring out how to navigate storytelling from a participatory, from an interactive point of view. I have been through many of these interesting trials that we have seen in terms of public agreement with our technology, but also public tension and stress with our technology as well. I create generative media. I wrote a book on prompt craft earlier this year, so you're welcome to check that out. And I've just started a band called Oracles, and so my band is in the house today as well. I work on AI filmmaking, but also specifically how we use our technologies to be more human, to be more connected, to be more whole, and hopefully to be more responsive to the world as it changes around us. So it's great to be here.
Thank you.
My name is Eddi Weinwurm. I'm from Austria. My company is in Germany. Yeah, how to describe myself? I don't know. It's very difficult for Europeans to sell themselves. But yeah, I studied once philosophy, and so I had two options, became a taxi driver or CEO. So now I'm the CEO of an AI company. I have this background of, actually I worked for TV quite a time. I did different things, and I'm in this AI world now since, I'm focused now since 7 years. And yeah, for me, it's an quite interesting topic. Yeah. So about the future and about the tools we have now and the tools we will have. And yeah, we will see.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Edgerton. So I'm here from Accenture, that big old consulting place that some people may know. I'll start with the career-y side, then the personal side. So from a career perspective, I came up in tech, all the big enterprise companies, worked in entertainment, actually had a talent management company for actors with disabilities for a minute. Did screenwriting, did producing, all that fun stuff. But currently I lead our global media strategy for the Accenture Microsoft practice. So what we do is we work with all the different companies that are media or adjacent to media, and we either build the tech for them or we do the large-scale consulting, all that fun stuff. On today's panel, the thing that I want to talk about specific to AI is the 0 to 1 mentality that as creators and humans, we all still have, right? And that doesn't erode if we use AI to magnify those traits. I'll get into that more later, but ultimately, I've been thinking about this really hard because there's a lot of hype around AI, and I work with it quite extensively in my role, right? And so it does a lot of things, but also does not do a lot of things that I think our brain may go to because of all the science fiction that we either have consumed directly or, you know, the media narrative drives all that stuff with it. So that's kind of what I'm about today, just to make sure that we recognize what it is and what it isn't, and where we, in all different facets of creators, technologists, all that fun stuff, can use it and not have it use us. So, thank you.
Okay, my name is Patrick Aguilar. I am actually an architect. My background is in architecture. We are working a little bit on AI and trying to figure out how to use AI inside of architecture, not just trying to do visualizing, but also integrated in part of the process of the design process. But separate from that, I'm interested in projection mapping, interaction, and digital art. And I've been working on something that I call the storyteller's machine because I'm really interested in interaction and storytelling. And it's just a voice recognition tool that it connects to Stable Diffusion. So you can plug in any audio file or video or spoken word, and then just images will start to generate based on whatever that is. So what I'm really interested in doing right now with this is trying to figure out how we can plug in different communities or cultural communities and try to make storytelling, something that they can use to enhance their storytelling or whatever stories they have from their culture and stuff like that. So that's kind of why I'm here.
Thank you. We have all been talking about ourselves as artists and how we all started using technology. You know, some of us started in film. And so I've been through film into analog, analog into digital, HD, 2D, 3D, XR, VR, AR, so on and so forth, all over the world, because I work globally, because why shouldn't I? And we're all culturally sensitive people. Some of us speak multiple languages, not just computer, but human languages. We all have different cultural backgrounds that form and shape our approach, and sometimes is the basis of our decision making. So a lot of us are involved in culturally embracive projects, global culture embracive projects. And so we could sit here and talk about blockbuster entertainment, which all of us have, touched on at some point in our journeys, or we could talk about present time, future direction of blockbuster entertainment. But there's personal reasons why we're all writing this chapter of our lives going forward, and we're writing it from our point of view. We all agree on this panel that going forward, there's really not that much to be afraid of, because you can innovate AI, you can invent AI. All of them, not me, but them. I'm just a user. But it's the users that are actually going to be choosing through how they use the technology, how they interact with the technology. Sometimes they're going to be aware that they're using AI, and sometimes they're not even aware that AI is part of the technology they're using. But what a lot of people don't seem to realize, and perhaps the media hasn't covered it thoroughly, is it's the users all around the world that are determining the course that technologies take. We can use them for specific projects, large budget, small budget, with specific goals and aims and pipelines, and we could talk about that. But we're here to also talk about the fact that we are using our consciousness and our awareness to choose how to use these technologies. And one of the things the media has left out of the conversation is they haven't been talking to us, artists, technologists, inventors. There's some kind of perception that men in white jackets in some bunker underneath a secret mountain are the ones who are developing AI, but it's actually everybody. Everybody on the planet is co-creating AI and co-using it. So it's really, there's a lot of power in the hands of the people. And so a lot of the projects we're doing kind of embrace that knowledge that the power is in the hands of the people, the power is in the hands of the users to actually develop a technology that's useful to them. And we all know from our cell phone evolution that if the cell phones aren't working for us and there's something missing or something lacking, we're pretty verbal about it. So we don't expect AI to be any different from that. We expect people, as they're using it and become cognizant of the fact that they're using it, to be very participatory with it. So something that Eddi and I talked about is that shaped the next chapter of our lives was Eddi, when he graduated school, studying philosophy, his first job was in radio and TV. And without any notice at all, he was sent as a journalist to Kosovo to cover the war. So he found himself completely unprepared in a war zone, covering war as a young person. I myself, as a visual effects supervisor, ended up doing projects that were outside of the US, outside of Hollywood, because that was my choice at a certain point. And I worked in a lot of conflict zones. So both Eddi and I talked about how when you watch people dying every day and you watch people killing each other every day, it's hard to come back. You can't come back to where you were. So when I came back to Hollywood, for me personally, it wasn't attractive to me to work on violent projects anymore. And as a visual effects person, that made my choices slim at that time, because it was during the evolution of analog to digital and digital into 2D and 3D. And so there were a lot of projects that were blockbuster hits that used a lot of violence. Nothing wrong with that. Every one of us has our own decision-making and our own journey that we're here to live as artists and creators and Imagineers. But for me, and Eddi can speak to this too, after watching people kill each other over whatever they were killing each other over, I just didn't find violence entertaining. So then I was, as an artist, as a writer, as an Imagineer, as a visual effects person, I'm like, okay, what am I going to do next? I had to imagine that. I had to imagine it. There weren't that many options. Eddi, your perception?
Yeah, I see this analogy maybe this way. When I was sent there, what usually people don't get when they're in a war zone is that you go to sleep there and you wake up there and you have no way to just step one step back and reflect it. Yeah, you're in it. Yeah, and that's different when you watch it in TV. You switch off and you can reflect what you have seen. So this was kind of traumatizing for me. But to get the analogy, we are now in a situation with AI which is quite similar, because we are all in it, and we're either scared, and I think most are scared, yeah, and we're scared. Maybe we deny it. It's denial. It's a typical reaction if you're really stressed and scared. So either you deny any danger, or you compensate it in another way. So as you mentioned, this not binary look on it, yeah, not either or. So it will neither make everything perfect, nor it will destroy humanity. The science fiction you mentioned, yeah. So AI will not kill us, yeah, but it will change our lives. It will change our society. That's I'm sure. At the moment, I see it as an opportunity. It will lead to a creative explosion. That's what I'm seeing. Yeah. So there are things possible for really people which are not in the industry to do things which are amazing. I'm always, when I'm just scrolling in Instagram and seeing what they produce now with AI, that's amazing, and that's just the beginning.
Yeah, it's I'll go to you next, Matt, but I'll set you up by saying that one of the things we talked about also as we were getting to know each other, from strangers to friends, was that the media, besides portraying people who are developing AI, inventing AI, innovating AI as, you know, men in white coats in a secret lab underneath a mountain, is they don't talk about human kindness, how artists and technologists are really driven by kindness, human kindness, not just their consciousness, but also their kindness. And that needs to be part of the dialogue going forward. So I'm also going to make a large statement, which is I think we're having an amazing time on the planet. I think by 2031, and whoever's watching this on YouTube in 2031, hi. I think by 2031, we're going to have passed through an era of wonderful, wonderful change. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment because you're all going to be expecting me to say the era of AI innovation, but I'm not. I'm going to say it's the era of human innovation. Human innovation from the point of consensus. As we're waking up on the planet and interacting with each other, we are discovering that ethics equals consensus, consultation, so that we're not portraying each other's cultures, our ancestry, our collective ancestry, and our collective wisdom in an inappropriate way, and cooperation. So I really believe that between now and 2031, what is going to cause the disruption and the falling apart of what currently exists is our human evolution in ethics, in consent, in consultation, and cooperation.
Oh my. Excuse me. Honestly, in 2031, I hope the aliens have shown up, truthfully. Anyone who's following disclosure stuff, big deal. But no, so, I mean, coming off of a war zone conversation is tough, candidly, to follow that. So I'm going to go back to one of my threads, looping it to kindness, what you said, right? So I think if you think about entrepreneurialism, and you can think about this, they call it entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, right? Those people who work within a big company and those that work externally. In Accenture, I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I have all this big company infrastructure around me. And you have to navigate the desires of the shareholders in combination with the desires of what you want to do and actually what's good for the world. So with AI in particular, I think the thing that I think is not worrisome about it to me, I know some we are worried about it, others we are not, right? I generally don't think it's going to impact creators in the way there may have been fearful of. I think it will impact folks in more enterprise scenarios, right? Because as we develop AI use cases for big studios, right? That's one of the things I do. It's very rarely focused on removing creators, removing editors, all those things. It's more around like, how do I do my finance better, right? Or how do I get a search more accurately? And so I actually think about the current set of AIs as more advanced thesaurus, because realistically, it's a language model. It's not AI in the sense that I or maybe science fiction would interpret that, right? Which was, here's a living creature built of technology that will interact with us. Anyone has used AI knows that you'll put in some results and the stuff you get back can be really wonky. So I think to our original thread, right, it's going to be about the entrepreneurs who create what that's going to be. And then particularly with the kindness aspect, I think what we're seeing with Gen Z and Alpha coming up is their value system is very different than traditional folks in the executive role right now. And they see the world in a much more, we'll call it egalitarian method, if you will, right? So I think their usage of AI will be much nicer than what we might be setting up currently. And I think those models are going to clash in that next 10-year period that you were discussing, right? It allows those who can't draw to draw. It allows those who can't write a song to write a song. I wrote a musical the other day and I used it to build all my song basics. I then have to go back and change it all because, for example, I wrote, one of my prompts was write a song along, Wish Upon a Star, which I think many of us know, right? Jiminy Cricket. And I specifically said, do not use Wish Upon a Star. And the first sentence was, when you wish upon a star. So it's like, there are definitely some gaps in the model that we're going to see other folks dumb it down or tune it. So I guess the big takeaway, and I'm trying to figure out how to loop this to like the earlier thread here, was as entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, when you look at AI, I think what's more impactful than thinking about how to use the AI is think about whatever business you want to create, right? Whether it be a script, whether it be a new process, a workflow, whatever. And then use AI to accelerate the grunt work. Because that's all the value I'm seeing drive from it right now. It's not going to create something novel. What happens with AI is the same thing that happened with Google. When Google came out, the original thought was now all these image banks, we're going to see a massive surge of new imagery and artists will go to it for inspiration, all that. But what we actually saw was the bigger it got, the more homogenized imagery got. And there was much less truly novel things. So I think AI will push that a little bit further. And those that kind of dive deep into their own creative process and think, what can I create that's really out of the norm, will actually jump forward to the pack much more quickly. Like, from an industry perspective, I think we're going to see a lot of, I'll call mid-brow television, mid-brow content. That's going to get pushed down our throats aggressively because it's going to be using AI to come up with a lot of structural aspects. But the era of the really advanced, thoughtful filmmaker is probably going to rise simultaneously. We're going to have two categories. We're going to have human high art, and then we're going to have everything else, which is kind of the trend I've been seeing with social media as of late. So I will take that thought and pass it over to Evo, because I think you probably have some thoughts on that.
Well, I'm working on a film right now with 14 amazing filmmakers all over the world who are working toward that more auteur approach using generative media tools, recognizing that generative media tools, and there are now thousands of them based on the transformer, what we're talking about as large language models, but also video tools and post-processing tools. There's a wide class of tools that use transformer-based approaches. That is based on collective intelligence. It's not artificial. It's not separate from us. It's a part of us. And that creates tension and that creates fear. It also creates opportunity, especially for the independent storytellers and for smaller teams that felt like maybe their world was too big to create, right? And that's in gaming and that's across the board. We're seeing it, of course, on apps. We're seeing it on YouTube. I make music videos. Our band is finishing an album. All of these media aspects are going to be booming because independent creators can use these tools effectively. But they then have to address, is it appropriate? Is it ethical, right? Am I doing this in tandem and in agreement with my community and with my collaborators? So my collaborators are here in the room and we discuss those ideas of consent before we model our voices in 11 labs to create a cipher of our voice. And what that does is saying, okay, we understand what this is going to be used for. We also understand that if we scan our voices, we're in agreement around that. That's a consent-based approach to scanning that isn't, I'm giving my identity to a big studio to use in perpetuity. That's a different agreement. And so I'm very interested in where creators can use these tools effectively, but also form good agreements with each other so that we're in right relationship with each other along the way.
Yeah, I just want to touch on what they all of you guys have said is like because me at least I'm not an AI guy. I don't know how to code. I learned everything that I know about digital art with YouTube tutorials. And it's like AI for me is kind of like the next step to the YouTube tutorials because now I can code something. I wanted to create a voice recognition tool. I just asked ChatGPT how to create a voice recognition tool and used it to make whatever I wanted to do. So at least for me, it's a powerful tool. I'm very optimistic because if we are all creative and curious people, we will be able to do whatever we want to do with using these tools and be able to really explore what we can do, right? I know I'm kind of going around things, but yeah, it's kind of like I'm very optimistic of what could happen. Even though there's fear and a lot of things, I think it's up to us, right? It's up to us in seeing what we can create and what we can do and just put it out there, right?
Yeah, I think the reason why we bring culture or keep bringing culture back into the conversation is because we're all from different cultures. And as I said, many of us speak different languages, not just computer languages. So we're aware in our own family situations of our multiculturalism, our cultural backgrounds. It's very significant, especially when you have elders who do ceremony or, historically you come from a lineage that is preserving their identity, cultural identity. And so what we're all talking about today is that we don't imagine, and I'll bring it to you next, your imagination, but we don't imagine this next era of creative flourishing is going to be in isolation. We've been talking about that as we were preparing for the panel. Like I said, we spent a lot of time talking with each other leading up to this panel, wanting to get to know each other, go from strangers to friends. And so when we talk about other times we've gone through big technology evolutions, from film to computerized animation and visual effects. When I worked with, when I was elected on the Directors Guild, and specifically them put in charge of trying to convince film editors that they should actually start using computers. It was really hard because they were absolutely 100% convinced that film was it. It was never going to go away. It was the greatest medium ever invented for storytelling, and they were really reluctant. So what I had to do was I had to bring all the people who were engineering and developing technology into the same room as the film directors and the film editors and the film sound and picture editors and music mixers and say, you have a choice here. You can either work with these people who are developing these technologies so that they're developing it for you to use, like see yourself as the user. Right now, you can't imagine yourself as the user. Like, you're doing a great job imagining yourself as the user for AI. Like you're seeking it out. But there are some people on this planet who we're talking to, the people will be watching this panel 10 years from now, wherever they are. They can't imagine themselves as AI users. Maybe they haven't got the education to understand that they're already using AI. Maybe it's some esoteric philosophy for them that doesn't make sense. Maybe it's something that's happening in some parts of the world, but it's not something accessible to them. Because, we all know, because we work globally, there's a lot of people on this planet who don't have cell phones. There are a lot of people on this planet who don't have computers. There's a lot of people on this planet who don't have TVs. They're living their cultural reality. But the isolation thing is really important because as we communicate with each other more and more, as we co-create globally through making friends on Instagram, as we co-create together more and more, it's really powerful because we become educated by the people we work with about their culture and their language and their expression, their appropriateness, their cultural appropriateness. So we're actually going to be massively educated, whether we want to or not, the next 10 years. We can stretch out to 2031 or we can go a little bit beyond that. And that makes this really, really different because we're no longer working in isolation. We're no longer in isolated conversations. We're going to be replacing, and that's something you can talk about again, but I'll go to Eddi next, is we're going to be exploring authentic culture on this planet. Not culture that if I Google Mohawk First Nations Canada, the only pictures that show up are completely culturally inappropriate, completely wrong, and weren't generated by the band, weren't generated by the Mohawk band, the Algonquin Nation. And so we're going to be replacing a massive amount of content that was just wrong in the first place. It was inappropriate, or it was just historically incorrect, or it was just culturally inauthentic. And so it's a very powerful next 10 years for us to really wake up together and co-create together. I'm going to go back to you.
Yeah, it's hard to define what's culture actually, and I see culture as something. It's not some entities, but it's something constantly evolving. It's a process of evolution you have in culture. It's information which is evolving from. And the question is, what role will AI play in this game? Yeah? So, what these large language models like ChatGPT are trained for? They are not trained for to produce some through or some facts. They're trained in the end. The utility functions behind this is just to present something which pleases the one who gets the answer. So, what culture are we creating with that? It's the question. Yeah, if I ask ChatGPT, give me some advice, it will give me the advice which pleases me. But on the other side, when we have these AI models trained on this utility for us, then I see the option that to have someone talking in opposition to you, telling you the things you don't want to hear. Yeah, that will be the interesting. And I think it's the same. What you said, mainstream will be probably that I switch on my TV in the evening and I get my own movie presented, which is tailored to me. Yeah. So even for the studios, it's maybe not good news. But on the other side, for this being in opposition, being like these small creatives, yeah, which have really a message to tell, which is not the message you want to hear. Yeah? There will be a market for sure.
I think you're speaking to stories that are both intimate and meaningful, but also maybe personalized, participatory, interactive, inviting us in. And that's a different relationship that gaming, for example, has done a better job at than maybe passive storytelling in film and sort of serial storytelling. So if you look at what's worked in gaming, it is that invitation to play combined with some experimentation and all of these other dynamics. But it's also a sense of inclusion and figuring out how to do that appropriately, sometimes by enabling a whole new market to grow or a new opportunity zone where all the creators get to tell their stories at once. And so this sort of, we are the storytellers telling the world to the many is it's a breaking model. There's reasons why the Hollywood model in particular, it's 50 years of a dystopian mindset, and that's a bad training set for us as human beings. So if you think about the last 50 years of storytelling, almost every story about AI is to be feared because it is a dystopian story at the end of the day. If you look at, there's almost no stories, maybe Big Hero 6 is one of the few examples of a movie where you have a positive relationship with an alternative intelligence or a technology. And so if we have to think forward, we need to tell different stories that are about symbiosis, interconnectedness, our relationship with nature and technology alike as being beneficial and moving in similar directions so that we are aligned and less sort of at battle, at wits all the time, because our storytelling, especially in Hollywood, is a very dualistic approach, and we live in a non-dual world. So it's not the either or, it's the yes and figuring out how to be improvisational with that yes and as creators, because we're all creators. Everyone in here is a creative being, and that creativity is our value. We're rewriting that equation all the time, but that creativity is our value.
Yeah, I think over the next 10 years, people are going to be placed in situations where their evolution, their personal evolution, is going to reveal to them, if it hasn't already, their personal decision-making process, which is based on your value system, your own personal value system, your own personal justice system. Some people on the planet might say, I don't have a value system, I don't have a justice system, what are you talking about? But it actually is inside you. It's part of, it comes with a suit. It's just whether you are aware of it and whether you use it as the basis to make your decisions or you don't. But I think over the next 10 years, as we go inward, you said entrepreneur, I like that. Yeah, I like that. We'll come back to you too. Um, it's really, it's such an era of individualization while working with others, receiving information and feedback that you may not necessarily are ready for, but it's going to reshape how we tell stories, and it's going to reshape what we're telling stories about. Our value systems globally are going to shift. They're not going to, there's a lot of things that aren't going to make sense to us anymore. And that's what people call things that fall apart. When you look at what falls apart on the planet, it's the stuff that just doesn't make sense anymore. And it just falls away and it's replaced by something that does make sense.
So there's one thing I want to touch on that you said that I think is super accurate. So one of the things we're going to see AI do aggressively is the gamification of life. So without getting into it, one of the biggest threads in tech right now is the gamification of everything. And it came directly off of the success of video games. Potentially they call them they're called live ops video games. So all those video games that have soared within the last 20 years, and probably know many of them, right? The thing that they did very well was they created a unique experience that engages you as a consumer, and it builds a community around that. So you're not doing it by yourself anymore. You're doing it with everyone else. And those aspects are being pulled into functions that you might not know. So the things that we're finding, and I'm doing this actually on quite a few areas right now, we're gamifying products that you would never know are gamified. So I'm sure everyone has had this experience at some point where you say something in a different room, and then a day later, Amazon flashes you an ad. Some would say it's because your Echo or whatever is listening to you, which I won't say it's not, but there are a bunch of factors that every time we go on the web and we do anything involving technology, somebody's watching it, someone is tracking it, somebody is harvesting that information, right? So there's two ways to take that. One, you either have to exit entirely, which we're finding, this is interesting. So Gen Alpha does not put their photos on the web. They put everything on the web via avatars because they've been born into a world where they know all information is harvested from birth effectively. So that whole consent conversation, very apt and will become more relevant as people grow in age, right? But the gamification and customization of things, this is where I'm a little worried, and it's the survivorship bias of AI. So what we find is just like when Google with all those images, kind of said to a similar level, you round off the highs and the lows. And so my fear with AI is that there's some very accurate pieces of AI that might not get fully utilized as a global society, because as we all throw things at it, the system's going to round off the highs and the lows and say, well, here's your generalized experience to appeal to 95% of everyone who's interacting with this tool. And in that last 5% is actually where we see innovation arise across all cultures, right? The 90%, the 95%, that's like all the things we already know. It's like, I have a car because I have to get from this place that's too far for me to walk. Then you go, how do I power the car? Well, you either power it with electricity, hydrogen, or gas, right? Those are all different things. But who's the first person to go, I don't need a car anymore. I'm going to rebuild the infrastructure that was already set up 100 years ago so they no longer become relevant, right? Or even better, we look at things like, well, now you're going to virtualize into a meeting, right? If we were to look at Zoom, you could find Zoom in 20 years might not be Zoom. It might be a holographic scanner. There's a tool out there right now where you walk into it. Anyone who was at Infinity Festival would know this. It scans your full image and it projects an entirely high rendered version of you at another place. It's really, really cool. So when we loop that with AI, I hope that the avatars generated from AI are not the generalized middling version of human society, right? Like that's a thought that has always worried me because
Inauthentic, unspecific.
right. Last thing, and then I'll shut up. The other thing that's interesting is if you think about customization and how it appeals to all of us, what customization does is actually it allows us the ability to live as a king or queen did many, many years ago, right? This is the common topic in society right now, which is we live a substantially comfier life in a lot of first world countries, but our voice, if you will, and the actual function of society is much more muted. So, and that happens because these customized chambers, right? They allow an idea to push itself into a place where it's maybe not the healthiest idea. We've seen that drive our society in different ways, right? That's the other thing about AI that concerns me, because a lot of people will see a Google headline or a news headline and accept it as fact because it's designed to appeal to your basis, whatever that is, right? AI is going to step that one up. And so our critical thinking has to evolve with it, or we're going to become slaves to the holders of that message. That's just like my general fear of it. It's not the AI itself. It's the messaging that is pushed through AI, just like social, like any of those. So thank you.
Yeah, real quick. I do think that like being able to give it to everybody is kind of like a powerful tool, because once you can start training your own models, you can customize it to whatever you want to do. So for example, part of what I want to try to do is give these models to certain communities and try to make them train these models based on their art, because I'm not I don't know too much about all the technical parts of AI, but the imaging part and the cultural part is kind of like I see it as a dream, right? Where a dream is just a compilation of all your visual memories that create images that are completely related to you. So once you can do this with AI, for example, like this, it will be a big tool for expression and uniqueness. But it has to be given to everybody, right, to be able to do it. Because once somebody controls this, I see that as the problem, because that's when everything is in the middle. Everything is just, yeah, just like, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I'd like you to talk more about your storytelling machine, but I like the point that you made, because when the body is at rest, when it's changed its state and gone unconscious and is sleeping, therefore in a regenerative state, there's a homeostasis involved. There's a stillness involved, and at that point, that's where the inauthentic is separated from the authentic. And so when you and I were talking in preparation for this panel, you were describing that your storytelling machine, you'd like to put it in the hands of everybody to tell their own cultural significant stories, or things that really matter to them, life-changing incidences from their point of view. So it really is not just a storyteller machine, but it's a storytelling machine so everyone can tell their own story. Let's just hear from Eddi for a minute, though.
Yeah, the gamification, that's a quite interesting aspect. And I see it quite differently. I see not that we're going to some average, to some mean, but I think we're going to a fragmentation. Yeah, because we will, when you interact with ChatGPT now and with the next generations, we will get answers tailored to us. Yeah, so quantum physics for small kids and so on. Yeah, so to my state of knowledge. Yeah, and the same we have now with computer games. So you can play these open world games in multiple different ways. Yeah. So you're no more sharing the common experience we had. Like, I don't know, when I was growing up, and we talk about the TV series which was aired. Yeah. So we will have all our own experience, and maybe we will have our Titanic movie playing in the Caribbean with a happy ending for me, and for you a different Titanic. Yeah. So I see this differently. Yeah. But of course, this gamification, that's something which is AI driving forward. But in what way? That's the question. Yeah.
One of the things you haven't touched on yet, but we've all talked about with you personally before leading up to this panel in our pre-production time, was how it's really important to you. And you were born in the States, but then you've been living in Costa Rica most of your life, and you just moved back to the States a year ago?
4 years.
4 years ago to LA. And so in your particular journey, your personal journey, you've discovered that Costa Rican culture is different, and the use of Spanish is different in that country, and their perception of reality is different. And I certainly experienced that, and I know all of you work globally, so there's nothing like finding yourself on some coordinate on the planet, and you're having a conversation with people, and you realize at a certain point their perception of reality is completely different than yours, and it will never be the same as yours. And so then you're trying to find a diplomatic way of consensus, or at least starting point, sometimes a starting point. So before we move back to you guys, I would like to tell us why it's so important for you to develop AI in your storytelling machine and your storyteller machine.
I'm always been interested in interaction, right? It's about having a conversation. So all of the little installations and playing around in my house, all of the things that I do, I tried to make it in a way that I'm not inputting anything. I'm just creating something where somebody can input something and then have something outputted, uh, images or sounds or whatever. So for me, it's very important that at least the artist or whoever's creating the tools are not inputting their personal input, right, into whatever the tool there is. It's whatever the tool you're creating is going to be made for uh, you being able to communicate or give your point of view into something. I don't know if that answers your question, but
Sure.
it's kind of like
You're helping us segue to the next topic, which is world building. One of my favorite things. USC used to do the amazing world building projects. I missed them terribly.
I worked there.
We actually discovered, as we got to know each other, we both also did the transformative technology labs in Silicon Valley, which were using AI for wellness, developing AI for health-
And using
and well-being.
immersive media, right? So to Patrick's point, many of us as producers are figuring out how to use like live ops games as a media studio, but also immersive live experiences as part of a documentary, right? So I'm vice president of XR Guild, and I've been making these immersive stories using volumetric capture, but also using real filmmaking in places like Brazil, Dominican Republic, and telling the stories of people where they are. Most of those folks don't necessarily, again, have a cell phone. They can't necessarily tell their own stories, but by working together with our documentary teams, we've been able to tell their story in very beautiful, intimate ways that feel like you are there because you're in a headset, right? You're having that deep immersive experience. And I think as more creators, especially folks who aren't necessarily in this room today, but are all over the world who are just getting access to these technologies, maybe only have a cell phone, but do have generative media tools on top, they can then make the next class of documentaries. And that may bring 1,000, 1,000,000 new documentaries. Where do those stories live? How do we find them? What is that creative experience where we can participate with those stories? That's the creator-centered generative media culture I'm interested in creating with all of you.
So
Thank you.
we are being a non-traditional panel because we all agreed, we're all in consent that we would like this panel to not be a panel, but sharing with everybody, including people 10 years from now who will watch this on YouTube. So we're not going to do a Q&A, we're going to do an opening up so you can participate with us because you're all here in the conversation. You just don't have a microphone in front of you. So we want to share the power of the stage with you all. So you don't have to ask a question. You can actually talk about whatever's important to you. The mic's over here. Just wait for the mic.
It's a traditional piece of AV equipment, however.
Hello, everybody. So I'm Marcus Bell, also Bell Ringer AI. I'm a collaborator with Evo and Will Henshaw, and we've been doing a lot of experiments inside of our music project. So I've been involved in AI for over 9 years now, and just earlier this year I did 100 songs in 100 days. And in the midst of doing those 100 songs, I got sick and couldn't sing. And that's when I went deep into the AI rabbit hole and trained my voice. Since then, I've done 30 books, over 100 music videos, and collaborated with some amazing human beings. And the thing that I wanted to bring forth into the conversation is that for us here in this room that are deep in the conversation, it's beyond what is going to happen into like this is a creator type community, but there are underrepresented communities around the world that aren't in this conversation, that we have the opportunity to open their eyes to the opportunities that are there for them. And that's something that I'm deeply committed to, that those stories be told for underrepresented communities, and that that we are able to give the tools in the hands of those stories that we all need to hear and bring more empathy and compassion into the world. So I just wanted to bring that into the conversation.
Well, thank you so much. Patrick's, please, while the mic's getting to you, what Patrick's planning to do, what he's been telling me in secret, with his storytelling machine, Storyteller Machine, is he really wants to work with Indigenous communities, starting in the US, of course, and starting with local LA Indigenous community. So the project is We're Still Here. And wouldn't it be great if the internet actually contained true images of the Indigenous tribes and their stories, but with consent, which means created by them?
I do think that it's important, like what you were saying, is to go to them, talk to them, and have them make the recompilation of all the material that is going to be used to train the AI, or to start generating the new images, right? The dream state images that are going to be like feeding back the storytelling. But yeah, for me, the most important thing is actually going there and seeing the art in person and being part of the creation of this, right?
Being, as a storyteller, being vulnerable, open to be led by somebody else, because somebody else also has a voice. It's not just your voice. So we're moving out of an ego-based system into a sharing, respectful system. And we can't avoid that.
Yeah, I'm not telling my story. Yeah.
I have no story.
Yeah.
Somebody has the mic back.
All right. Hi. So I think it's fair to say that in order for generative AI to have like any kind of ethical future in the arts, AI models will at some point need to stop being trained on like stolen artwork, stolen writing, et cetera, without giving people the option to like opt out. So my question is, what are the steps you think need to be taken, or what steps are you currently taking to help move today's machine learning models towards something more ethically sustainable? Or do you think this is going to be something like Google, where people just have to kind of get used to having their data out in the open at all times?
I got this one. So I can tell you from a big company's perspective, like both Accenture and other companies, legal defines what gets put in, what doesn't. So what we need to adopt as creators everywhere is the same mindset that the large companies have, i.e. my IP in my head, I share what I want to share, knowing that it may hit, Creative Commons public domain. If there's something very specific you don't want to share, I would not recommend putting it into the systems at present, because there isn't a model, and I'm not personally aware of a model to lock things out, right? Once it's in, it's in. That's where we've actually seen AI hit a lot of blockers in large companies, is when they go to implement it, right? We'll call it the Wild West version. When legal or some other executives get a hold of it, they're like, well, wait a minute. Anything I put in here is immediately no longer copyrighted. So they're like, we don't put it in. So from that standpoint, I would say everyone in this room and ourselves on the stage, like when you're looking at AI, put in the idea in a way that it helps you, but not in a way that it gives away your creative advantage. So like in my instance, I used it to generate some bass songs in that musical that I was writing, knowing that I didn't use it to generate any of the actual dialogue. And also I took those bass songs and then rewrote them. At this point, I would never say use a finished AI product just straight out, unless you don't care that it gets used somewhere else.
More to like artists who were just doing their own thing and having their work stolen and risk their user training. Do you think there's any way to protect people like that who still want to be involved at all?
Yeah, I'll repeat it. So he was saying this is more for artists who are putting their stuff out there, and is there any kind of protective mechanism for them to make sure it doesn't get stolen, right, out in the way that Google or any of the others, potentially could reuse it?
There are protective mechanisms being developed, but primarily for image, less so for spoken word or for written word or for video. Mozilla recently hosted a hackathon in which they awarded to a product that is designed for artists to be able to protect their work. Whether those tools actually work for the artist is to be determined. There are a couple of them currently being tested out there. And there are both opt-out and opt-in models being developed, right? So Stable Diffusion has said that they're moving toward being able to give people the opt-out option. Obviously, that doesn't work for everything that's already on the web that has been scraped. I assume that the US is going to move towards something closer to the GDPR that will include some change in how we approach fair use across the board.
The United Nations is working on that as well. I work with the United Nations Digital Cooperative for digital fairness worldwide. And that's something that has to be part of whether it's digital medicine, digital healthcare, digital education, digital filmmaking, digital communication, you know, because bodies like the UN that have taken on the challenge of digitalization of the planet, they can't do it without coming out with some kind of not regulatory system, but protection system for individuals, which is a huge change on the planet when you think about it. Before, protections and legal protections were used for the state. Now they're being used for individual power, human rights.
I will say within the XR industry, we are trying to be proactive and develop best practices toward ethical development that allow for the consent-driven approach to happen early in development, because once you are scanned, your data might go across platforms. And what happens between platforms is also important. So I just wanted to put that out there as a conversation, because all of you are in the conference rooms where those conversations are happening.
Question, kind of taking it from the creative side to the enjoyment side and the discovery side. On the music side, heavily using AI already. 120,000 new songs on average every day are being put up. Kindle, Audible, magazine submissions are being deluged right now. For the folks creating new, unique, authentic content, where are we going or needing to go on AI helping with discovery and the deluge of content that's coming out?
I think we're heading in a way where we have all our own music created in the end. So we just turn it on and it creates instantly the music we like to listen, and it's a new music. And coming back to this intellectual property question, yeah, I think on the long term we will have to accept that AI is just like we are, yeah. So in the history of art, you have had always the copying, yeah. The copying is the fundamental of art and reassembling. And to say, okay, take me out of this, yeah, I don't know if it's really working, and I'm not sure if we don't have to accept that we are now interacting not just with humans which are copying us, but also with AI.
Yeah, I'll just say this. I try to be a practical person, and in many cases, for example, the UN, I've worked with them for climate measures, things of that nature. And anyone who follows any kind of climate thing knows the UN's pretty bullish on it, right? They're trying to put new measures out and what. But ultimately, there's a rubber meets the road perspective of all these things. You can legislate it. The EU is a little different GDPR, right? They have teeth. But as creators, or whatever you want to do for AI, if you can't defend it and you don't have the resources to defend your property once it's into the system, you're still in a hard spot. So you still need to use good information hygiene for whatever you want to use. For songs, I think that's a real hard spot, because my fiance, she's a composer and a musician. And while it accelerates a lot of aspects, that is a danger zone for a lot of people, even entertainment. AI and music is a tough one. So in this area, I will say I'm not an expert on the AI and music, because it's a really deep specialist area, but it's a risk zone. So for us using and watching, consuming the media, it's great. Like, we get our own specialized songs, whatever, right? We get our specialized endings, doesn't matter. But for all the people entering in as musicians and creatives, it's risky.
I will say, as a band, we've been talking about how much do we Creative Commons? How much do we release to the public? How much do we make a bot that's interactive and let people play with the models and spin with us, right? So massive remix culture is also enabled by generative media.
We have a couple minutes left, and so I see a lot of hands. we're going to be around so we can continue the conversation. But I just want to give everyone the opportunity on the stage. Is there something you want to say and put in this video that'll be on YouTube for the rest of our lives and outlive us? Is there something you really want to say that you need to say?
I think we should start to rethink society as soon as possible. And I'm not looking pessimistic about rethinking society, but we will need to. And we should start this conversation as soon as possible.
I'm excited to collaborate with you in this new time where we can do this work effectively and collaborate effectively with both technology and with all of our human hearts. And so the band is called Auricles, A-U-R-I-C-L-E-S, like the ear. And you can check out the film White Mirror later next year.
Yeah, mine's really simple. So in the new world we're walking into, the creativity still lives with you. The 0 to 1 is still in all of us, right? It doesn't matter what the AI does, doesn't matter how many times it recirculates it. That original idea was somebody somewhere doing something. So whether it be business, art, music, whatever, right? It becomes more relevant that you know your own creative style and how you go from 0 to 1. And harness that, and then these technologies will wash over you and it won't be an issue.
And for me, I'm just excited of all the doors that are being open and being able to do a lot of things that I wasn't able to do without having to go to school for 10 years.
For me, I've dreamed ever since I was born. I've dreamed of this time, and I was just hoping I'd live long enough to experience it. Infinite possibility and potential, and working with everyone globally, respectfully, and each individual choosing for themselves how to use and create with technology, and whether it's useful to them or not, and giving everybody feedback who's developing technology. Important feedback, like something that really matters to you, and voicing it, feeling like you have a way to voice it. So,
Can we squeak in this guy? He's been good and hold his hand up.
We actually can't, but I want you to definitely follow everyone out after this session and grab them to talk to you. You guys are going to be here for both days, hopefully. Let's have a big hand for a panel, and what a great non-panel leading. Lisa, thank you so much. So everybody, in about 10 minutes, we're going to be having a session here digging into Stable Diffusion with Devant Systems and having a great discussion about new tools with Stable Diffusion. So getting into creating some of this great content with that great tool. And then at about 1-ish, we have lunch, and we also have a mixer at the end of the day here. And tomorrow, a great mixer where you can actually bring colleagues who didn't attend the show, and we have a band playing and all sorts of other fun things happening. So stick around and enjoy the rest of the show. Let's have one more big hand for this great session. Deep thoughts.